The story begins not in the libraries of men, but in the trembling memory of the earth itself, long before the first cities rose from stone and clay. Before the oldest myths etched themselves into the minds of tribes, the serpent slithered across the dreams of humanity. It was not yet a creature of flesh alone, but a living glyph, a pulse in the cosmic mind. It appeared in visions beneath the eyelids of the shamans, winding like the rivers of creation, its scales shimmering with the constellations of an unborn sky. Ancient peoples did not see the serpent merely as an animal. They saw it as the curvature of time, the hidden axis upon which the visible and the invisible worlds turned. It was the whisper in the roots of the world tree, the spiral in the shells of the deep sea, the coil of the unborn child in the womb. To speak of the serpent was to speak of that which connects birth and death in a single breath, of the eternal Ouroboros that devours itself and is reborn in endless cycles. Even in the ruins of forgotten civilizations, this truth remains carved in stone, in the crumbling temples of Göbekli Tepe, in the shadowed recesses of caves adorned with Paleolithic art. The winding form appears again and again, as if drawn from an ancient code embedded in the human spirit. Archaeologists call them ornaments, patterns, decorations. But those who listen with the inner ear hear something older, a song of the serpent as cosmic teacher, a guide through the labyrinth of existence. In the sacred tales whispered by the priests of summer, it guarded the knowledge of life and death. In the oldest fragments of Egyptian myth, it wound around with solar bark to fend off the chaos serpent Apep. In the forest temples of the Olmec, it descended from the sky as the plumed serpent Quetzalcoatl, carrying the wisdom of the stars. These were not separate myths, but fragments of a single current flowing beneath continents and millennia, like a subterranean river feeding different springs. And so, to trace the hidden history of the serpent is not to follow the path of an earthly creature, but to walk the invisible road of humanity's spiritual evolution. It is to step into the current of an ancient initiation, one passed down not in words alone but in symbols carved on temple walls, in secret rites beneath the moon. In the dreams that speak with a forked tongue, the first veil has been lifted, the serpent as primordial archetype, winding through the dawn of memory. Ahead lies a deeper revelation, how this symbol was guarded, transformed, and hidden in the secret orders of antiquity, awaiting the seeker who dares to ask why it has always been feared, and why it has never died. When the first cities rose from the dust of the Neolithic, the serpent moved from the dreams of shamans into the guarded chambers of priest-kings, in temples of mud, brick, and basalt, under skies charted with the careful eyes of ancient astronomers. The symbol was no longer only whispered, it was encoded, veiled, and bound to rites that only the initiated could comprehend. In Mesopotamia, the serpent coiled around the staff of Ningishita, lord of the underworld and keeper of the celestial gates, his very name, carved in cuneiform on clay tablets now cracked and half buried, meant lord of the good tree, a reminder that the serpent's knowledge was always entwined with the mystery of life, death, and rebirth. To pass his gate was to die to the world you knew and awaken to one you could never fully describe. The Egyptians, too, kept their serpents close to the heart of their mysteries. In the coiled uraeus that crowned the forehead of the pharaoh, the serpent became a living amulet, its venom a metaphor for divine power, death to the unworthy, awakening to the chosen. Only in the dim inner chambers of Karnak and Abydos was it spoken openly that the serpent was not merely a symbol of protection, but the very current of transformation itself. To walk the serpent path was to allow one's mortal form to dissolve into pure spirit and be reborn with the eyes of a god, beyond the deserts and fertile rivers. In the dense jungles and stone plazas of Mesoamerica, the plumed serpent watched. From temple summits, Quetzalcoatl, Kukulkan to the Maya, was not feared as a tempter, but revered as a bringer of maize, mathematics, and the calendar that wove human time into the vast machinery of the cosmos. He was said to descend in cycles, guiding humanity through ages of light and shadow, a teacher who always departed before the world grew too blind to see him. Even in the lands of the far north, among the sagas of the Norse, the Midgard serpent circled the world, its body the horizon, its breath the storms. Here, the serpent was the boundary of all things known, the living edge of reality. To confront it was to confront the limits of human perception, and perhaps to pass beyond them. Everywhere it appeared, the serpent's meaning shifted like a shadow in torchlight, healer or destroyer, guardian or deceiver, wisdom or death, and yet, to those who bore the keys of the mystery schools, these opposites were but the two halves of the same truth. The serpent was the axis upon which opposites reconciled, the current of the great alchemical work, to dissolve and to coagulate, to die and to be reborn. Thus the orders of old, from the Sumerian temple cults to the Hermetic brotherhoods of Alexandria, wrapped their teachings in serpent coils, speaking in parables, fainting in symbols, and swearing their adepts to silence. They knew that the unready would see only danger in its fangs, but the prepared would see the medicine in its venom, and yet, as the serpent's power grew among the wise, so too did the fear of it among kings, priests, and empires who sought control over men's souls. The time was coming when the symbol would be broken, its meaning inverted, and its wisdom driven underground, where only the most persistent seekers could follow its trail. It began not with a single empire's decree, but with a slow reshaping of memory, a deliberate alchemy of the collective mind. The serpent, once a guide through the spiral of initiation, became painted in shadows, its image twisted to serve the ambitions of those who feared what it truly offered. In the ancient Levant, amid shifting alliances of tribes and empires, the old serpent cults met the rising tide of new priesthoods and the sacred texts that would shape millennia. A subtle war of symbols took place. The serpent of Eden, once a voice of awakening in older myths, became the deceiver, the corrupter, the tempter into sin. The tree it once guarded as a gateway to divine knowledge was rebranded a forbidden threshold. Its fruits no longer the food of gods, but the seed of humanity's fall. This was no mere story change. It was a calculated inversion. To turn the serpent into the enemy was to sever the common man from the very path that the mystery schools had guarded for centuries, the path of direct communion with the divine. By placing a celestial throne between man and the source of wisdom, the keepers of the new order could control the flow of knowledge, deciding who was worthy to ascend and who would remain in ignorance. Yet the old currents did not vanish. They retreated beneath the surface, woven into allegories and hidden in stone, in the labyrinthine vaults beneath Hellenistic Alexandria, where Greek philosophy met Egyptian priestcraft. The serpent continued to coil through the scrolls of the Hermetica. Speaking of the Agatha Daemon, the good spirit in serpent form, who whispered the secrets of the one thing, the eternal substance from which all realities arise. The alchemists of later centuries, inheritors of this veiled tradition, kept the serpent alive in their manuscripts, the Ouroboros circling the words hen to pan, all is one. Its endless loop the very formula of creation. To the uninitiated, these were quaint mystical doodles. To the adept, they were the cipher of the great work. Even in the cathedral carvings of medieval Europe, one might find it, hidden in the margins. Colder on the tree of life, twined in the hair of saints, its presence tolerated only when clothed in the robes of allegory, in whispered tales among certain knightly orders and clandestine brotherhoods. The serpent was spoken of as the keeper at the threshold, the guardian of knowledge that would free man from the chains of his false masters. But in public, the verdict had been passed. The serpent was cast as the enemy, the shadow to be slain. In sermons, in stained glass, in the moral theater of mystery plays, it was the villain, never the teacher. The great irony was that this very image of the serpent as adversary was itself the mask of initiation. For those who could see past the fear, the serpent still spoke in its silent, eternal language, waiting for the seeker brave enough to uncoil its truth. The next veil lies deeper still, where the serpent does not merely dwell in myth, but is bound to the very structure of the human soul and the hidden forces within the body. The serpent had been exiled from the public temples, driven into the shadows of forbidden lore, yet it was never truly gone, for in the deepest traditions, passed not through ink or stone but through the living breath of master to disciple, the serpent was understood as something far more intimate than an external symbol. It was the hidden force coiled within man himself. In the esoteric schools of India, this current was known as Kundalini Shakti, the sleeping serpent that lay curled 3.5 times at the base of the spine. This was not mere metaphor, but a precise map of awakening. The initiate, through breath, mantra, and inner discipline, could rouse this luminous coil, guiding it upward through the subtle centers of the body until it crowned the brow in blinding light. Here the serpent was not temptation, but liberation, the spark of divinity rising from the roots of mortal flesh. The Egyptians had hinted at this long before, their hieroglyphs showing the serpent emerging from the forehead of the awakened, Pharaoh symbolizing the opening of the jat, the eye of inner sight. The Greeks, inheriting fragments of this science, encoded it in the caduceus of Hermes, twin serpents rising on a central staff, wings crowning their union. To the untrained, it was a mere emblem of commerce or medicine. To the initiated, it was the diagram of the perfected human, energy balanced and consciousness unfurled. The same thread appears in the esoteric Christianity of the desert mystics, who spoke in whispers and riddles of the serpent of bronze lifted by Moses in the wilderness. In the surface tale, it healed the afflicted Israelites from the venom of earthly serpents. In the inner reading, it signified the raising of the fiery life force toward union with the divine. The alchemists of the Islamic Golden Age preserved these currents, hidden within their diagrams of serpents devouring their tails, spiraling toward stars, and curling around the alembic of transformation. They knew that the same power that could heal could also destroy, that the awakened serpent could shatter the mind of one unprepared, just as surely as it could transfigure the worthy. Thus the serpent became both the goal and the danger of initiation. It was the fire that could temper or consume, the guardian of the innermost gate. And in this truth lies the reason why the symbol was both revered and feared across the ages. It is not simply an image, but an active force, a latent current in every human being, a direct bridge to the divine source that no priest or king can mediate. But the deeper we follow this current, the clearer it becomes that the serpent's story is not confined to the human form alone. It winds further still into the heavens, across the constellations, into the architecture of time itself. Long before humanity measured time in years and days, the serpent's body was already traced across the sky. The ancients did not see the heavens as a void scattered with stars. They saw living forms, divine intelligences that wove the fate of worlds. Among these was the cosmic serpent, whose undulating form moved not only through myth, but through the very geometry of the stars. The Babylonians charted it in the constellation Hydra, the great water serpent flowing beneath the solar path, guardian of hidden treasures in the underworld of the night sky. The Greeks would echo this in their tales of Laodon, the sleepless dragon coiled about the golden apples of the Hesperides, a stellar sentinel whose position shifted slowly through the ages. In Egypt, the Milky Way itself was at times seen as a celestial serpent, the winding body of man, encircling the solar god to protect him on his nightly voyage through the duat. The Mayans and other Mesoamerican peoples looked upward and saw the same sinuous form, mapping it in the dark rift of the galactic plane, a cosmic road that the plumed serpent descended to bring civilization from the stars. These stellar serpents were not idle ornaments to myth. The priests of old observed that certain alignments, when the serpent star rose heliacally, or when its coils intersected the sun or moon, marked the turning of vast cosmic cycles. Temples were built to these moments, their stones aligned to the serpent's celestial stations, their rituals timed to the pulse of its cosmic heartbeat. In the lore of the Dogon of West Africa, the nano-amphibious, serpentine beings from the star Sirius descended to teach humanity sacred law and the weaving of the world's fabric. In these stories, the serpent was not merely an inhabitant of earth or sky, but a messenger from beyond the veil of time, a traveler between the spheres. Even in the cryptic visions of the Gnostics, the serpent could be found in the heavenly pleroma, quoting, as the serpent of light, Sophia's wisdom embodied in the dance of the stars. To them, this cosmic serpent was the hidden pattern of reality, the spiral of galaxies, the DNA of creation itself. The ancient astronomer priests understood what happens above shapes what unfolds below. The serpent in the heavens was mirrored in the rivers, the roots, the winding paths of energy through the human body. To know the celestial serpent was to read the clock of the universe, to anticipate the ages of light and shadow, and to align oneself with the great turning of the cosmic wheel. Yet here too the knowledge would be veiled, scattered, and coded in myths of monsters and dragons, lest the uninitiated tamper with the cycles they did not understand. For the serpent in the sky was not only a map of time, it was also a key to those who sought to move beyond time altogether. There are whispers and forbidden texts and the half-burned fragments of heretical scrolls that the serpent's knowledge was not confined to guiding human awakening or mapping the heavens. Some claimed it was the architect of portals, the bridge between worlds, and that to follow its coil was to slip beyond the linear flow of time itself. The ancients spoke carefully of such things, hiding their meaning in tales of heroes entering the belly of a great serpent, only to emerge changed, bearing gifts from another realm. To the untrained ear, these were myths of danger and conquest. To the initiate, they described the passage through a living gateway, the spiral tunnel of the serpent, as the passage between dimensions. In the temples of Chavandi, Quanter, in the high Andes, stone carvings show serpents flowing from the mouths of divine beings, their bodies winding in impossible geometries. Some researchers, unshackled from orthodox timelines, have suggested these images preserve the memory of shamanic journeys, where the serpent's body is the tunnel through which the soul travels to reach the other world. In the secretive rites of certain Egyptian priesthoods, the serpent was a guardian of the duat's hidden corridors, those invisible roads that led the ka beyond the stars. In these rites, the initiate, through sacred utterances and symbolic death, would pass the serpent's coils as if moving through concentric veils, each one a frequency of reality, until arriving at the luminous heart beyond form. Even the Norse myths speak in the same tongue. Jormungandr, the world serpent, encircles all realms, and when it moves, the boundaries between them tremble. In this telling, to awaken the serpent is to shake the very foundations of reality, to open paths that were closed since the first dawn. The Hermetic texts hint at this with great care, describing the serpens mercurialis, the mercurial serpent, as the bridge of the soul's ascent through the planetary spheres. In the great work of alchemy, it was not enough to purify matter and spirit. The adept was also to learn the winding path by which the soul could slip the chains of the cosmic order and step into the timeless source. Yet these teachings were among the most closely guarded, for such knowledge in unready hands could bring ruin. To traverse the serpent's path without preparation was to become lost in the endless coils, trapped between realities, a ghost to all worlds. And so, the serpent as portal remained a whisper behind temple doors, a cipher in sacred geometry, a pattern in the floor mosaics of certain forgotten sanctuaries. Those who sought it know they were walking the edge between awakening and annihilation, the razor's edge that only the true initiate could cross. Beyond this lies the penultimate revelation, where the serpent's power is entwined not only with individual awakening or cosmic order, but with the fate of entire civilizations. Civilizations rise and fall as if moved by an invisible hand, and in the chronicles of the initiates, that hand is the serpent, not as a tyrant nor as a savior, but as the hidden current guiding the tides of human destiny. The wise have long known that when a society aligns with the serpent's path, it ascends into an age of vision and creation. When it turns against it, the light withdraws, and the empire crumbles into dust. The annals of Egypt whisper that the golden age of the Old Kingdom was born in the time when the pharaohs walked in harmony with the serpent wisdom, their rule guided by the Heka, the divine magic that flowed through the land like the Nile itself. In those days, temples were built not merely for worship, but as living engines of resonance, coiling their sacred architecture on serpent-like currents of energy in the earth. The fall came when that knowledge was hoarded, corrupted, and turned toward control rather than illumination. In Mesoamerica, the coming of the plumed serpent marked the rise of ordered calendars, advanced astronomy, and the codices that wove the fate of crops and kings into the rhythm of the cosmos. Yet when greed and war eclipsed the serpent's law, the bringer of wisdom departed, and with him went the harmony that had sustained the cities of stone. The pattern repeats in Mesopotamia, in India, in the Mediterranean world. When the serpent is honored as the axis of life, as both creator and destroyer, as the cycle that must be embraced, cultures flourish in balance with nature and the stars. When the serpent is demonized, or its knowledge chained by the few, that culture loses its alignment, drifting into decay as if cut from the source. The keepers of the mysteries understood that this was no superstition. The serpent, as they taught, is not merely a symbol of knowledge, but the very law of cycles, the spiral of time, the rise and fall, the turning of ages. Those who read the serpent's movement in the heavens, in the earth's energies, and in the human soul could predict the shifting of eras. Some say they could even influence it. Secret societies, from the Pythagoreans of Magna Graecia to the veiled adepts of the East, sought to preserve this law against the blindness of kings and the fury of the masses. They watched for the signs, the return of certain stars too, the serpent's celestial coil, the trembling of ley lines beneath ancient sanctuaries, the awakening of serpent power in a new generation of seekers. These, they believed, heralded the turning of a great age, and so it is said that we too live in such a turning. The serpent's shadow moved once more across the world, stirring both fear and fascination. Its symbol rises again from the vaults and the ruins, calling not to the nations, but to the individual souls ready to step beyond the illusions of this age. One veil remains, the final mystery, what the serpent ultimately is, and why it will never die. To speak the final truth of the serpent is to step beyond the walls of history, beyond the myths of nations, into the place where symbols are born. For the serpent is older than man, older than the earth, older even than the first star that lit the darkness. It is the shape of the universe itself, the living pattern by which creation coils into being and withdraws again into the silent void. In the visions of the earliest adepts, the serpent was the first motion, the spiraling breath that broke the stillness of the absolute, dividing light from shadow, time from eternity. In this sense, every myth, from the Eden serpent to Quetzalcoatl, from Kundalini to the celestial dragon, is a fragment of the same primal memory that all life flows from and returns to, the spiral. The Hermeticists called it the anima mundi, the soul of the world, winding through all forms. The Gnostics saw it as the Jan Sophia, wisdom herself, descending into matter and rising again in redemption. The alchemists drew it as the Arboros, encircling the words, and to Pan, one is all, for in the serpent's endless cycle lies the truth that nothing is ever lost, only transformed. This is why the serpent cannot be destroyed, Burn its image from the temples, and it will rise in the constellations. Curse its name in scripture, and it will whisper in the dreams of mystics. Erase it from the schools of the learned, and it will uncoil in the body of the seeker in the shiver of awakening that no doctrine can suppress. It is the archetype that underlies every other, the eternal teacher hidden in the guise of enemy, the gatekeeper who tests the worth of all who seek the great work. For those who have passed its trial, the serpent is not a being but a law of cycles, the reconciliation of opposites, the current of life force that flows between the worlds. To ride the serpent is to ride the pulse of the cosmos itself, to see birth and death, ascent and fall, expansion and return as facets of the same jewel. And so, the hidden history of the serpent symbol is not merely the story of an ancient archetype, but the story of ourselves, of our forgettings and rememberings, our falls and awakenings. It is a reminder that wisdom is never truly lost, only hidden in the coils of time, waiting for the moment when the seeker dares to follow its winding path. If you have listened with the inner ear, you will understand. The serpent has been with you all along. It waits at the threshold of your own being, as it waited at the gates of Eden, as it coiled in the stars, as it whispered to the adepts of forgotten ages. Its promise is always the same. Drink, and you will awaken. The choice, as it has always been, is yours.